Welcome to Make Pop Music. My name's Austin, and today I'm going to show you how to make a song in the style of Harry Styles like this.
You and me, I just wanna make love in midnight, drink you up like champagne under stars and the moonlight.
Welcome back to another video. Austin here from Make Pop Music and Austin Hall Audio, and today we're going to be going over how to make a Harry Styles song, particularly in the style of his new album Harry's House, but this will also kind of apply to his last album Fine Line. We're basically going to be looking at laying down things like retro synths, laying down some kind of funk inspired guitars, laying things down like some kind of vintage acoustic sounding drums, and then filling that all out with really nice bass lines and vocals. So by the end of this video we should have a full song all the way up from a verse to a chorus, and I'm basically going to show you everything that will go into producing something in this style. So if you like this video, please make sure you like, comment, and subscribe when the video is done. And then after the video, if you want to support our channel, you can head over to makepopmusic.com, where you can check out all of our free and paid content over there. We have sample packs, preset packs, courses, we have a podcast, we have tons of other videos and free content, so definitely go check that out when the video is done. But without further ado, let's actually hop into Cubase so we can start building out this Harry Styles track. Alright, what we're going to do to start out this session is find the right key and tempo. I'm going to set the tempo for 115 because I kind of want it to be upbeat but not like dancey or anything like that. So this is going to feel nice. And I'm going to pull up easy key so we can lay down some chords and find what key and what progression we want to sit in. Alright, so let's play around with a couple chord progressions and see if we can find something that sticks. Alright, so I'm thinking what we're going to do is we're going to sit in B major, and I'm kind of liking what I've noticed that Harry does in a lot of his songs is instead of having 4 chord progressions, he'll do 3 chord progressions where he either has a chord, has a chord, has a chord, and then circles back around to that first chord, or he'll kind of sit on that first chord for 2 bars and then go to the second and third chord for 1 bar each. So let's do something like this, E major 7, then down to something like this. It's a D flat minor 7, and then we'll go to something like B major 7. So those will be the 3 chords. I'm going to lay that down in a pattern and in a structure that feels good, and then we'll check back in. So this is what we got for the chord progression with a kind of cadence on it. So we kind of pedal on that E major 7 for 2 measures, and then we go to the D flat minor 7 and then to the B major 7. So feels pretty Harry Styles. If we were to have 4 chords, I don't know, it just might not work for a verse. I'm trying to keep this as simple as possible, and then adding in some of those 7ths really helps it kind of float into that like 70s kind of psychedelic kind of funk thing that he's got going for a lot of his chord progressions. So if we're in B major, we would have, this would be a 4, 2, 1. So we're going 4, 4, 2, 1 on the chord progression. And let's go ahead and let's start layering that up with an actual synth so we can get a sound to it. I'm going to be using Arturia's Analog Lab for the lead synth on this. I found that he uses a lot of kind of like Farfisa, Mellotrons, CS80s, any kind of key sound that you would find in the 60s, 70s, or maybe even early 80s is going to be kind of a go-to on his album. So I found this patch called Mellow Mellow. What I'm going to do is I'm going to tweak it because right now it still feels a little bit bright and open, but I'll let that play through as we tweak the sound. So we're just starting with this preset, and let's tweak it. That's feeling a little better. I don't want so much of that delay because it might get kind of like discombobulated, but this is feeling good for now. We might tweak it later as we go, but there's the main key sound. I'm also going to layer that main key sound up with something that's kind of like more of an E piano. So I'm just using that Easy Keys Dream Machine library with one of their patches called Romance. And this is kind of just adding a little bit of transient to the beginning of those notes, and it's adding a little bit of width because I have this as like a super, super roomy version of like a Rhodes or an E piano. So Those are the two sounds mixed together. They create this nice little like vintage but still modern sounding wide patch. And now that we have that, let's lay down some drums. For the drums on this, we're gonna keep it super simple. We're gonna do a 4 on the floor with the kick and then a snare on every 2 and 4. And for the kick and the snare, I am using our Sour Candy kit. And here's what it looks like and sounds like. So. And a little tip is if you still want that kick to be, you know, on every 4, just bring the velocity down when that snare is hitting. That way it's not super dancey, because if we were to do it like this, it's gonna have a totally different vibe. It feels way too dancey. We're gonna bring that velocity of that second kick down so we can really let the snare shine. We're just kind of using that kick to beef it up. And I'm gonna go ahead and find a hi-hat loop that kind of just gives us a little bit of live texture and movement, and then that should do it for the drums for now. All right, here's a loop. It is just from our hi-hats pack that we have at Make Pop Music. And this is live tracked and it's at 110 BPM, so I just sped it up to 115. And by having that live played hi-hat loop that's got some of those like ghost notes and room sound in there, that to me is giving me that kind of like vintage Harry Styles sound. And now I think it's time that we lay down a bass line. I laid down a bass line. It's really simple. There's not much to highlight. We are using a patch from Trillian called Clean Fender Mute, True Staccato. Here's what it sounds like with the patch, with the pattern that we've kind of laid in. But to me, that still sounds way too modern and has too much low end, so I'm gonna do a little bit of mixing on this. All right, now I'll play it through with some of the mixing while I sort through. Basically what we're doing is we're just taking out a lot of lows and low mids. We're doing a little bit of like compression / running it through like, you know, a quote unquote amp. And then again, just taking care of those mids, low mids, and then adding a little bit of mid bite. Here's what it sounds like now. Taking away some of those subby lows, taking away some of that like really, really boxy midsection, and just scooping it out so it fits a little bit better in the mix. This is kind of like the main structure for a Harry Styles song right here. We're gonna add a lot to this, but here's what we have is like the basic breakdown. What I want to do now is duplicate everything over so we can extend this verse, and then I'm going to start layering more percussion so we can start filling this out. We'll kind of layer up everything, so a couple more synths and a couple more percussion elements. The drums are done for this second area of the verse. All we really did was add this extra thick snare right here. It's not doing anything wild. I just put a little bit of EQ and reverb on it, just to give me kind of that wider, kind of punchier, splashier snare sound that he has in a lot of his records. And then we just added a little clap loop to give us some backbeat. And then I know that I want to, for this bass right here, let's take this kind of first note right here, this E, let's take it down an octave because we kind of sat higher in the register. And now I want a little bit of that like low end to come in. Now I want to add some pads and some kind of background synth element so we can fill this out, and then that should pretty much do it for the verse as far as instrumental. We did add a couple things. Let's take a look at what we added. The first is really important actually. It's like a synth melody. I just felt like the chords were perfect, but they were getting a little bit boring. So I took one of our patches, E-Bell, out of our Poptopia bank for Serum, and I just did a couple little tweaks on that, did a small EQ curve, and this is what I got. It kind of reminds me of like that sitar sound that you'll hear a lot in like the 60s, 70s, kind of psychedelic, like Beatles-esque records. And that's a counter melody that I see Harry Styles kind of utilizing a lot. And then I just found this pad that I printed out. And it's got a nice big kind of psychedelic chorus slapback delay kind of vibe going on. And then the last thing that I did was I found these extra keys from Serum from a patch called Vibey Road out of our Spectrum bank. And then I just kind of processed that with a little bit of EQ, doing some mid-side stuff. I noticed that Harry Styles' record has some super, super, super wide synths. So how I wanted to achieve that was take a layer that wasn't so conducive to the actual structure, scoop a lot of the mids out, boost a lot of the side up, and then go even crazier with adding like the Juno chorus. So here's what this sounds like with no processing. Nice cute little pluck. Here's what it sounds like with some of the EQ moves we did. Making it a lot brighter and a lot wider, and then with a chorus in the mix. And that's pretty much all I want to do for the verse. I do have a little drum fill that's going to go into the chorus. It sounds like this. So let's go ahead and lay down some chorus stuff. What I want to do is probably build out the drums first, and then I think I'm going to change to chord progression. So let me layer out all of these drums so we can see what we have, and then I'll check in with you. The drums for the chorus are done. Let's take a look at what we did. We chose a slightly different hi-hat loop just to give us a little bit of extra movement. This one has some open hats in it. And then we also layered one more snare. This is kind of a roomier snare. It sounds a little bit like this. And that's just a snare that we added a bunch of reverb on. It's snare 3 from our, I believe, disco pop pack. And then we added this clap loop that we have from the verse. I added one more hi-hat just to beef up the kind of quarter notes. Because if I take that out, the hi-hats just still feel a little bit soft. So I added that in just for some extra texture. And then pretty much every Harry Styles song is going to have some kind of tambourine and shaker happening. And these are both live track loops from tambourine and shakers loop pack that we have. And I believe they were in 110 BPM, and I just shifted them over to 115. I didn't really do anything other than that. Then we have this big clap that I'm layering on the snares. I have a tambourine that I layer on like a few snares here and there. And then last but not least, we just have a couple crashes from one of our cymbals packs. And that's it for the drums and percussion. Let's go ahead and think of what we want to do for the chord progression. I'm thinking I'll probably stay in the same key. I don't really want to do a key change, but I might use a chord that we haven't used yet and kind of go to a 4-chord progression instead. Maybe I'll still do 3 and I'll kind of go 1, 2, 3, 1, but let's see what we get. I'm going to play around and then show you what I get. Here's a chord progression I ended up coming up with for the chorus. I kind of wanted to leave the cadence that we had, the bump, 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 because I'm going to build off that, but here is the actual chords now. So you see we're doing that E major 7, but then we're using this G flat dominant 7, which we haven't used yet, and that feels super Harry Styles, super kind of Beatles-esque, where you're using something that still falls in the key, but it's not like a really common chord that you would find in there, and that to me just adds quite a bit of texture. G flat dominant 7, back to that B major 7. So for this chorus, it ends up doing a 4, 5, 1, 4, which is not a super common pop progression, but it is kind of common in the Harry Styles repertoire. I'm going to go ahead and throw that with the kind of synth patches that we already have and the drums. Let's go ahead and get some bass in there just so we can have something for that low end. It's just going to kind of pedal on those notes. Here's the bass. The only thing that we're really doing that feels kind of special is we're extending these instead of having them kind of really staccato. And then we're just using some like walk-up notes. So like I'm using that A flat as a walk-up note, and then we're just doing a couple like octave jumps here. And that just makes it feel a little bit more realistic, so it's not quite so boring. Here's what it sounds like with that in the mix. super Harry style sounding to me. I think that we should kind of add some pads in here just to fill that out still, because as a chorus it feels a little bit small. So I'm going to add a couple pads, maybe a brass sound and a lead sound. I added in some layers so we could thicken up this chorus. We've got this kind of Mellotron style pad from Omnisphere that sounds a little bit something like this. With just some shelving happening on some EQ to make it a little bit brighter. I did reverse that sound into itself as like kind of a natural rise into the chorus. And then we have these soft keys that are playing the exact same chords. This is just from Spectrum on our site. It's a keypad called Doughy. So here's what that sounds like. I just printed it because it was causing a CPU issue. And then we have one kind of like small thin brass sound called Dusty Old Pal. It's a pretty simple, just like square wave brass that we've made. This one's in our pack Poptopia, but you could recreate it pretty quickly probably. It's bright, but it still feels kind of like weirdly hollow and kind of chorusy. And then other than that, we just got some synth layers to do kind of a lead melody in this chorus. And all together, here's what we have. That's going to do it for all the programming. Before I add vocals, I do just want to add some guitar because that's something I see coming up in his album quite a bit. So I'll lay down some guitar, show you what we get, and then we'll move on to vocals. All these tracks in blue are the guitar that we added. There's not a lot going on, but I will show you because we do have some cool stuff happening. So I am using the Archetype Corey Wong amp for these verse guitars, and I am using this Postal Service pedal that's going to give it this weird kind of like, almost like a wah pedal effect. And here's what we're doing with that. I've got that on 2 tracks, one spread out left. I don't know why I marked that right. That one's spread out left, and the other one is spread out right, and they're just kind of filler pieces. Some nice like funk inspired guitar, he uses that quite a bit. And then on the other side, like a funky, almost surf rock kind of guitar. So here they are in the mix. And then for the chorus, it's even more simple than that. We've just got these really soft palm mutes. And you can hear that there's still a little bit of that like buzz from my computer, but it's in such a dense mix, it really doesn't matter at all. Totally still usable, just using that Tone King Imperial amp. And then we actually have one guitar that's panned right for this whole chorus. This is, again, using the Corey Wong amp, but kind of a more kind of funk-inspired DI sound. And then for one part of this where we build up these synths, I also built that guitar on the left. Just as a textural element, but it's the same exact thing. Here's what the chorus sounds like with all the guitars now. And now it's time for vocals. So I'm gonna write some lyrics, lay down some vocals, pull those in, and then show you exactly what I did. All these purple tracks are the vocals that I've just added, so you can see what, I'll basically break down the arrangement and then I'll break down the mixing afterwards. So for pretty much everything, we're triple tracking it. I found on his album that he does these like really wide kind of triple tracked, or at least double, or sometimes even quadruple tracked vocals where he'll have one in the middle, one panned out, one panned out. And I noticed that he'll keep his ones that are panned out a little bit off time and a little bit out of tune, and that kind of makes them feel a little bit wider. And so here's what it sounds like when we have the lead vocal with the left vocal and the right vocal.
I'm passed out in your car again. I barely even know my name. I think I drank the bar again.
Here's what it sounds like in the context of the mix, and you'll immediately hear, I'll let you hear it with the 3 vocals stacked, but then I'm gonna kind of mute the side vocal so you can hear it with just the lead, and you'll see how much different the vibe is.
I'm passed out in your car again. I barely even know my name.
That versus this.
I'm passed out in your car again. I barely even know my name.
Still sounds great. Doesn't feel like the Harry Styles record though, in my opinion. So we're using triple vocals throughout the whole thing, and those are tracked individually. So a vocal track for the middle, a vocal track for the left, a vocal track for the right. Sang the entire thing 3 times through, tuned, edited, did all that 3 times through. So it can get annoying, but it does help a lot. I noticed that he uses pretty dry vocals, but sometimes he'll do these kind of big psychedelic delay throws. We kind of highlighted something really similar in our Silk Sonic video, so if you haven't seen that, go check that out. And we'll get to the vocal chain for the leads in a second, but this is basically just that with an 1/8 note delay at 100% wet with a tape delay emulation on it. And then we're using this flanger from Eventide. I noticed a lot of flangers, choruses, phasers, things like that on his album. And then we're just making that delay throw a little bit wet with some vintage verb from Valhalla. And you can hear it's got that like echoey, phasey, kind of like toned back 70s sound that you'll hear a lot.
Do some cheap cocaine. We can drive to the.
And I'm using those pretty sparse throughout the whole thing. Like there's one here, and there's a couple in the chorus. But that's pretty much it. Other than that, the only other vocal layers that we're really doing is we have a right and a left harmony for certain phrases in the chorus.
I just wanna make love at midnight. Drink you up like champagne under stars in the moonlight.
And then we're doing like a really kind of shitty high falsetto vocal, but I just tucked it so far under. And what's important about this is I'm using a phaser again on this, so it can kind of give us that weird, warbly, kind of off-kilter vibe, because that's going to tuck it into that mix real nice.
I just wanna make love at midnight. Drink you up like champagne under stars in the moonlight.
So we're just using those on certain words and phrases, and then we kind of have a post-chorus. It's like a B section of the chorus, where then we go back to that original melody that you just heard. But for that, we're kind of doing these U chants, and the only thing I've added is this little guy. And that is the main vocal pitched up an octave in auto-tune. I've literally copied it from the main vocal track. And then I'm using Avox Warm, just distorting the absolute piss out of it, throwing on a doubler so we can get some like wide kind of chorus effects, and then a little bit of reverb and a little bit of EQ just to kind of put it into a space and tame some of those highs and lows after all of that saturation. So here's what all of the vocals sound like in the chorus now with the actual instrumental.
I just want you. I just want you. I can bring you coffee and red wine.
And then the last couple vocal things that we'll talk about are these phasey vocals left and right.
You're the only thing that's crossing my mind.
And I just took those from our normal left and right vocal and basically just added a flanger to it. So they kind of had that weird warbly going around kind of a rotary speaker vibe.
You're the only thing that's crossing my mind.
Faded in that delay throw and then pulled in a high falsetto for the last couple words and pulled in that like really high artificial harmony for the last word. So that's all the actual vocals. I can show you the vocal chain real quick. Before I dive into that, I did track it with the Lewitt Audio 1040. So I use that on the warm setting, mostly on the tube setting with a little bit of FET dialed in. Here's what the vocal sounds like straight out of the mic.
I'm passed out in your car again. I barely even know my name.
So it's nice, it's warm. I am adding quite a bit of syn, so we've got a parallel widening syn that is a Roland Dimension D, just to give me some width. We've got a short reverb, which is just a really, really short room from Verb Suite. We have an 1/8 delay, which is just, I believe, from Repeater, kind of similar to that delay throw that we had earlier. And then we have a long reverb from Valhalla Vintage Verb, and then a 1/4 note delay from Repeater. And all of those sound like this.
I'm passed out in your car again.
And then we have some auto-tune, that's not important. Pro Q, we're taking away quite a bit of these kind of lows and low mids.
I'm passed out in your car again.
We have some de-esser. The sibilance wasn't crazy on this.
I'm passed out in your car again.
And then here's where it gets really gnarly. We start adding quite a bit of compression and another de-esser.
I'm passed out in your car again.
And I am using the modern instead of the vintage. I just liked it better for this mic. And then a 2A is going to give you that kind of like nice, warm, fluffy low end. That's why I pulled so much low end out earlier. So we're still getting kind of a big, thick vocal. Compressing it a little bit more with RVox.
I'm passed out in your car again.
And then a little bit more EQ where we're cutting out a lot of the lows, low mids, and just kind of taking care of some of these honky resonances.
I'm passed out in your car again.
And then lastly, on all of the vocals, I have repeater as an insert doing this weird slap back.
I'm passed out in your car again.
And I just have it dialed back.
I barely even.
And that is it for the actual vocal mix. It's the same thing on the left and right vocals. And then I ended up doing quite a bit of bus processing because I still didn't feel like they were quite vintage sounding enough. So here's what they sounded like without the bus processing.
I'm passed out in your car again.
And then on here, I just did a little bit more de-essing with Pro DS, a little bit more EQ where I just like really made sure that we weren't getting any low end on the sides from those harmonies, and just some kind of mid adjustments here. Some mag EQ because I kind of wanted a little bit more air in there, and I just did some fine tuning. A gain plugin just to kind of normalize things, and then the last little bit of multiband compression. And here's what the final vocal sounds like.
I'm passed out in your car again.
So here's what it sounds like in the mix.
I'm passed out in your car again.
Versus if we had something like this. I can use this just as a little gain adjustment, so let's try.
I'm passed out in your car again.
So it felt cool. I just wanted everything a little bit more kind of bright, vivid, and punchy. So that's pretty much it for the vocal chain. Other than that, there are a couple bus chains that I can show you that we ended up doing throughout the video. Specifically on this drum bus, here's what it sounds like with nothing. I'm using this pawn shop compressor from Corniff Audio to get really punchy, kind of fat, insane sounding drums. Here are the settings for that. I love this plugin so much. I used RC Color on a lot of things actually, just to kind of like tame some of the low lows, tame some of the high highs, and just give us a little bit of distortion and noise. And then a little bit of Pro Q, just to make sure that we don't have too much subby lows. I've noticed that in his drums, there's not a lot of content under like 70. So we did that for the drums. On the bass, we didn't do any bus processing because it was only one track. And then on the synths, we used the Motown EQ from Kit Plugins, just kind of boosting some of the highs and high mids. And then we did a Pro Q where we're doing just a little bit of kind of mid-side EQ. This is basically to just carve a little bit of space for the vocal, and then just to make that synth feel a little bit wider on the sides with that top end. So here's what this sounds like with nothing, and then with the inserts. Just sounds a little bit more, you know, quote unquote mixed. And then for the guitars, nothing on the bus. I showed y'all all the chains for that. The last thing I'll show you is the mastering chain on this, because this is one of the songs where it was different. So we'll go ahead and we'll break it down step by step. First thing I did for mastering this was used the FG Red, and I'm doing quite a bit of compression. Normally I'm only hitting this like 1 to 3 dBs, but I noticed Harry Styles' album sounds massively compressed, so that's what we're doing here. Taking away a little bit of gain before we hit Saturn. We've gone over this. This is just my Magic Mastering preset that I've made. And then this is where it comes really important and different, is I'm using some tape saturation from Isotope's Ozone 9. So this is just vintage tape. Here are the settings. I'm using the 7.5 so it can dial off a little bit of that hissy top end. And I'm just kind of adjusting the drive, the bias, the harmonics, and the emphasis, just to give me a little bit of some tighter lows, some kind of rolled off highs, and that to me gives it that vintage sound. Takes it back like 20 years, and that felt good to me. This is a brand new one for me. I'm using the Music EQ from Elijah, or Alicia, I don't know the pronunciation, from Plugin Alliance. Never used it, but thought that this needed a little bit of something at the end, so I just found this preset, did a couple adjustments. And using it in mid-side mode is really what gave me that like crazy wide Harry Styles sounding master. I was referencing his entire album on this, and the whole thing was just ridiculously wide but still mono compatible. And then we're using Lin MB on the multi-electro mastering preset, same thing we always do. No tweaks there whatsoever. And then here are my settings for Pro L. So I've got this as a wide and open preset, so super late attack, kind of a long release as well. And then we're just doing some gain boost to kind of get it to where we want.
And
when I downloaded his album, most of them were sitting at like -8 to -7 LUFS. That's right where we put this one. And so with everything, that's the entire track, all the mixing, all of the bus processing, yada, yada, yada. So here it is. I'll let you hear it from the very beginning, and then we will wrap this up.
I'm passed out in your car again. I barely even know my name. I think I drank the bar again. I saw you do some cheap cocaine. We can drive till the morning, ignore all the warnings. We're just too young and wild and free. We could sleep in the desert. You can wear my sweater. Shut out the world, it's you and me. I just wanna make love at midnight. Drink you up like champagne under stars and the moonlight. I just wanna wake up at daytime, kiss you like some strawberries and know that you're still mine. I just want you. I just want you. I can bring you coffee and red wine. You're the only thing that's crossing my mind.
And there you have it. That is how you make a song in the style of Harry Styles, particularly with Harry's House and some of the more upbeat songs on that record. So hopefully this video was helpful to you. Let us know what your favorite tip and trick down below was. Let us know what your favorite song off of his album was in the comments down below. And then if you have any questions throughout the video, please let us know down there and I'll answer whatever I can. Other than that, please make sure you like the video and subscribe to the channel. It helps us out a ton. And if you want to support the channel, you can head over to makepopmusic.com, where you can check out all of our free and paid content over there, including all of our other tutorials, sample packs, preset packs, courses, podcasts, yada, yada, yada. Go check it out. But we appreciate you being here. I hope you learned a lot in this video. We'll be back next week with more content. But until then, much love. Peace.